Katie, this is going to betray my ignorance about the Sun, so please forgive me. I believe the Sun is not behind a paywall, is that right?
So the Sun website isn't paid.
Yeah, so I'm just interested in how that works out for you in sort of your marketing culture, because with the Times and the Sunday Times, you're selling the subscription.
Yeah.
But Sun, it's a very different proposition. So how does that work out for you?
So on the Sun, I'd say we're slightly behind in the digital journey. We do have actually paid digital experiences. We have a paid smartphone app and we have a paid tablet proposition. Both of those are subscription.
Right.
So we're beginning on the journey to subscriptions with the Sun. But I didn't touch on, but it is true that our entire organisational structure is all News International in the marketing function. So the sales team work for News International and work across all of the brands, so that we can deploy that learning from the Times as we move to market with the Sun quicker.
Yeah.
So it isn't true of the website, you're right, we don't have a paid experience for the web, but we do in smartphone and tablet.
And if I can just sort of relate that to sort of a follow-up, when you're selling the Times and the Sunday Times, are you managing to get people culturally to the idea that you're selling the subscription rather than the physical printed item, which is of course the history and the romantic association, I guess, that's behind it?
So I think that you've unlocked something there about what customers will pay for, and I think customers will pay to own something, which is why that the web has been more of a challenge for people in the publishing industry to understand how they approach it, because ultimately you're paying to access in the web rather than to own. So with the advent of tablets and smartphones, actually what you've got is the concept of downloading and owning and creating libraries that you can keep moving into, as I said, our future platform, because tablets and the digital print experience is going to be the future for all publishers in many ways. So the challenge around paying for access is that actually it comes back to it's the marketeer's ultimate dream, because ultimately people pay for things they value. So it's about the value people associate with your brand, and also the value that very much like the O2 Priority Moments proposition, your differentiated value proposition, which is for us something called Times Plus, which is a membership program that subscribers have access to. So it's been much more difficult in the web because the access is what you pay for. But the future market of tablets, I think that you have that owner, you have the owning concept, but it's just translated differently.
Is that because the content will be there forever once you've bought it?
At the moment it's 7 days at the library, but I think that what you're alluding to and being able to save and be able to create your own virtual library, yes, that will be part of our future development roadmap.
Thank you.
What you were saying, just picking up on something that Katie and everybody's talked about, which is how important people are to drive cultural change, etc. I know you were aware of this, Katie, but Tony Evans, football editor of the Times, last night actually live tweeted how he was helping to masterminding, putting together the football section of the Times over the course of the evening, which was extraordinary. Copy coming in, misfiring graphics section, going to get a curry from the pub. And when I think about 5 years ago, the reaction of people like Tony to this sort of area, now to see that, which became a phenomenon. Everybody was talking about it because, of course, there's recently a big football match going as well at the same time. So very, very interesting that. We had a question at the front.
Yeah, it's a common theme, which is most of the speakers have talked about today, which is culture and driving a culture of change and a culture of innovation, and some very interesting ideas about changing culture within your teams. But it seems, how do you change culture at board level if we've got this big clash of cultures between traditional, being that this is 20, 30 years, they know, and sometimes at the board level, execs are thinking, look, this is a problem for the next guy, right? Like retire soon and have somebody else worry about it. Meanwhile, we've got startups that are building up businesses and powering forwards because they're run by digital natives who don't hold fear. So some of you have obviously got your boards to buy in. So how do we really change the culture at the top to give you permission to go ahead and do these things?
Short answer is I've got no idea. So I think if somebody said to me, well, what haven't you done in the last 2 years? And I'm quite proud of what we have done. But it is localised, purposely localised in that there's other IT teams that deliver large-scale billing platforms, and I'm never even going to try to change that culture. It's not even worth it, I don't think. So I'm not sure we have to change the entire board. I wish I'd got more board-level sponsorship for the change, so that it was top-down as well as bottom-up, and essentially kind of focused bottom-up. And we didn't get that. So I don't really know how to get it, because you can't walk up to a board and go, "Hey, let's go agile," because it's not really that interesting. It's how you do it, and they trust you to do the how. So don't know.
I think changing culture at board level, I mean, the obvious way you see is a change at the top. So you bring in a new person who then brings somebody along, and you try and therefore change the culture of the board. But I think what you see is more departmental change around culture in large organisations, where you can start and control that, and people are beginning to change that. I think actually, if you look at the UK, we've still got a lot of industrial age thinking at board level rather than knowledge age thinking. And there'll be a whole generation thing to change it wholesale. That'll be a timing issue. Some companies will be braver and employ people that will take bigger risks. But that, for most of the companies, is a discussion about shareholder value, shareholder price, stock price affecting. And when you get to the really big decisions, that puts the whole sugar on investment. So I think it's going to be a rich mixture of change from the bottom up at department level, higher folks saying to change the board, because what you don't see in many senior managers and leadership roles is up for a massive change, and that is, if they've been successful in one business, if you look at what they've done when they're arriving at your business, 9 times out of 10 you can work out what they're going to do, because they'll repeat a winnable process. Why would they change? They've been successful in 10 years, built business value, I'll come here, it's a repeatable pattern. That makes it tough, and I accept it's tough for the individual, but it makes it tough for a board level change, I think.
Yeah. I'd say 3 things. The economy is actually our friend in all of this, so recessions make you have to do things differently. We're all asked to cut costs, and actually one of the most efficient ways to do that is to embrace technology. So the experience from our side is actually, the cost-cutting exercise has become a friend in actually getting new thinking in and new ways of doing things. I'd also say that I always sit next to my new married husband in every meeting, so marketing and technology are always sitting next to each other. I mean, it's physical, but it does show collaboration, like in real terms, that we always seek each other out to sit next to each other, so we can be aligned. And the third thing is make the board meet the customers. So sit them in a room, get the customers talking, that totally opens their mind, because if you say it to them, oh, it's some bloody research. Whereas actually, if they hear it from the customers themselves, it's much, much more powerful.
How do you drive it? I don't have a quick answer either, but what I would say is the things which we're trying are, by being agile, by doing small incremental change, frog boiling change can be as powerful as dramatic change. But it's also about being open, it's about getting people involved and saying, this is how we can do things, this is how we can save you money, this is how we can get you new business, this is how we can make the world a better place.
It's probably really a question for Chris. Are there any sectors in the UK economy that are showing higher levels of digital maturity? I mean, is there any kind of sector bias in the findings that you've had so far?
The report's not statistically accurate, as in terms of the sample size. There was 40 plus organisations. So given that you're from a research background, John, I don't think there's anything that I could stack up and say, if you measure this and analyse this, this is what it looks like. I think what you do is you take a view of the research over the 3 years, and you say that retailers have been very, very strong in building online capability. People like John Lewis, renowned for customer experience and the way they've built that. Argos moving into digital, now more than 40% of the business coming through their online channel from a start 6 years ago of virtually no income. So retailers have led the way, and that's been driven to some extent by Kate's point. That is, they need to search out every last pound every day. They're in a very tough trading environment. Every Monday they meet and they discuss the sales, and they set off again for another week. And that environment, that drive has driven them to use digital more powerfully. And I think the really good ones as well have backed that into logistics and wound the logistics costs down to next to nothing. And you look at Primark and you look at percent of turnover of IT at a business like that, 0.5, 0.6%. You look at a telco going through an investment cycle, 5-6% of turnover. You know, they drive a different set of economics, and I know the businesses are wildly different. I get that, but they drive a very hard dollar to get margin and sales, and that need is driven very strongly, and they're good at it.
At the back.
Yes, now I'm going on a course, and some other people who are engine are going on a course shortly to learn how to write code. It's a one-day course, and I'm wondering whether the other people inside this room, but specifically on the panel, people who believe that learning to write code would help them inside their companies be the torchbearers of digital even more.
This presumably is technology code, Robin, rather than Morse.
It's not. You're clearly in the right space.
Okay, I just wanted to check. Mark, do you want to start with that one?
I think it's a really good thing to do because code is a tool. If you don't know what tools can do, then it's very hard to know what you can use it for, but it's also very hard to know if someone's ripping you off or not. You know, one of our problems has been in government was that the public sector was that we lost a whole layer of kind of technology, digital native, digital capability. So when a supplier came in and said, oh, blimey, you want to change that picture on your website, it'll take 30 days and cost you 15 grand. We would go, that sounds reasonable. That sounds fine. Yeah, go for it. So on that level, I think it's a really good idea. Secondly, I think it's a really good idea because it makes you think. And anything which makes you think is definitely a good idea.
You go again.
Yeah, am I going on this course? I'm just going to say, I don't know about code, about writing code. I used to write program code about 30 years ago, so the program's probably disappeared off the planet. But I think what's interesting about technology is, in my experience, I was part of the launch team that brought the first computerized delivery system into BT, and that got rid of the whole paper distribution for orders and distribution within the company. And I think working on that project, you got to understand the technology, and what you got to understand was the sheer capability of it. And because you were from operations, you were able to put them two things together in a very different way and completely get how you could use that technology. And the way we used it, because the operational team were driving it and were steeped in it and were taught how it all worked, I think that the value that the company got out of it was massive. So in a wider sense, yeah, understanding what it can do, and that's a little bit like what Kate said, working with the technologists. The marketeers get to understand the art of the possible, and they're not limited by the thinking. They can see whole new vistas of how to use that technology. So I would think it's positive, yeah.
You're married to technologists, I mean, writing code seems like a logical step.
I have actually been on a code course, but it was in about 1999, and I realised it was a 5-day course, and I went in on day one, and I realised I wasn't going back on day 2. And that was good in and of itself. It's like I've never had a driving lesson. I still value people who can drive cars. I myself do not want to ever learn to drive. I myself never want to learn to code. But I recognise the value of coders. I'd rather bring in the skill than people who can do it. I don't think you need to go on it. But you like toolboxes, so hey ho, enjoy.
Well, so I think everybody should learn to code. Or at least because, and I guess it depends on what you're going to code, but I don't know. Well, I guess so. You don't need to learn how to code as in write code, yeah. But what I do think is that the internet is the way that we communicate in the future, and developing code, at least things like HTML, JavaScript, that's the language of the internet. And so it's a bit like learning English. I think all the children should learn to code, because that is the language of how their communication tools are built. And if you don't understand it, or at least have a feel for how it's created, you won't understand how to use it. So I do think it's very important.
On that note, we'll wrap up. So I would just like to say, on behalf of Transform and Engine, huge thanks to the panel. It's been absolutely brilliant. I'm sure you're joining me in just putting your hands together.